Today we put together a team of Laserfiche integration experts to talk about their tips, tricks, and advice for integrating Laserfiche with other applications. As we heard in yesterday's keynote speech, Laserfiche often serves as a hub for collecting information from a variety of primary applications, and we commonly get questions about integrations. We thought the best way to answer this question is to let experts share their advice and their experience. So let me introduce our distinguished panelists. Right, here's Chris Cartrett. He's the document management coordinator at the town of Palm Beach, Florida. Chris is a 5-year Laserfiche administrator for Palm Beach. He has worked extensively with integrating the Tyler Eden ERP system and has a Solution Exchange article regarding this. He's also a moderator for the government page on Laserfiche Answers, so you've probably seen him around, and he's also gold certified. Next to him is Joe Labbe. He's the CEO of RatchetSoft. RatchetSoft is the company behind the very popular RatchetX integration tool. Joe has worked with countless Laserfiche clients developing integrations with applications that are notorious for not playing nice. Joe is an incredibly valuable partner, and we're excited to have his expertise on the panel. And then at the far end there is Brad Eudy. He's a systems administrator in Cabarrus County, North Carolina. He joined the county in 2009 as a systems administrator specializing in IIS and SharePoint. Brad is now responsible for all aspects of web systems, Laserfiche, and DSS enterprise applications. Brad holds a BS in computer science from the University of North Carolina. In addition, he has completed several Microsoft certifications, and he is also gold certified. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to try to keep things lively. Yay.
Give it up.
Perfect.
No.
I was going to say, we're going to try to keep things lively this afternoon. I don't know about any of you, but I had a lot of sugar at lunch, and I'm hoping that I don't crash. So we'll keep it fun. But to kick things off, why don't each of you just tell us a little bit about some of the applications that you have integrated with Laserfiche? Chris, go ahead and start.
Well, my claim to fame is with Tyler Eden, which has been an exceptional, formidable opponent as far as figuring out what Eden's doing and how the data flows, and a lot of trial and error. You know, I've paved the way, and I'd love to, just give back what I've learned, because there's no documentation on it. So it's an ERP system it's a little tricky.
Joe, what about you?
Sure. We do a lot of integration with applications like Tyler Munis. Where we really kind of earn our pay is when we integrate Windows-based clients. I mean, a lot of times folks want to do an integration into a browser application, and they're generally easy to do. But when you start working with things like Windows terminal emulators to connect to AS400s or other kind of legacy systems, or desktop applications that can be developed by anybody using almost any development platform, they present all kinds of challenges. And what we've done is we worked really hard to make sure that we can get into all of those applications. So we've got a lot of experience in that. I head up the professional services group, so I'm quite familiar with all the kinds of projects that we've done, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Awesome. Brad, what about you?
So we've kind of taken the stance on we're going to integrate Laserfiche with everything, regardless of whether it makes sense or not in most cases. But we've done some integrations with Tyler Munis. We've written some custom integrations to assist our sheriff's department with handgun and concealed carry permitting, which is kind of the big thing we've been doing. And right now we're working on an integration with our investigation division to create a repeatable process for prosecution summaries. And we're working with OneSource on that, so that's kind of the pipeline for now.
Awesome. So to get things started, what's something that you wish you would have known before starting an integration project? Chris, do you want to go ahead and kick this one off as well?
Sure. Probably the last couple projects, I've gotten into it, we've begun beta testing, and we're getting ready to launch the thing, and somebody has a eureka, showstopper type idea, and, we have to reassess and reevaluate. So in regards to scope creep, there's different levels of scope creep. Sometimes you want to reevaluate what you're doing. So if I were to leave one idea with you, it would be like, how are you going to handle that eureka idea. You know, are you going to reassess it? Are you going to start from scratch? Are you just going to add on to what you have? Are you going to push your timetables back further? You know, who's going to be the final say? You know, who's holding the ball? You know, who can decide whether to go forward with this idea or not? So assessing scope creep, especially really good ideas, that kind of change the game.
Brad, any thoughts? Joe?
I think that one of the biggest things for me, this is kind of an easy question, is I always came up writing code for everything. And with Laserfiche, you don't have to write code for everything. In most cases, you may not have to write it for anything. There's a whole suite of products that'll get you from point A to B without the code. So I have to tell myself, let's look at the big picture and see what pieces we can integrate or we can use to get this integration done without sitting behind a computer and writing code.
Joe?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of good points to be underscored when you talk about scope creep. Often that happens when you don't have a really strong project manager running the project. Quite often what happens as a vendor, we want to get in and we want to do our piece. We don't really want to learn a whole lot about the business because we're not automating we're not changing the workflows and things like that. We're moving data around and we need somebody to tell us where to move the data. But if you don't have a strong project manager who doesn't have to be well-versed in the technology, they need to have kind of a conversational level about it, but they need to know who the people internally are, who the power players are, and they need to have everybody focused, because what happens is quite often you'll be working with an end user group, and then they kind of flutter in and flutter out of the project because they've got other demands, they've got their real job to do, and then all of a sudden you continue to iterate and iterate and iterate, and eventually you're in a perpetual beta, which most customers can't afford. So strong project management. With regard to the tooling, one of the things that we also find with our product is that once one of our partners or one of our customers learns how to use it, it starts to become the hammer that makes every project look like a nail. And so understanding that it's okay to kind of veer away from the tools that you're comfortable with because they may not be the most appropriate tool to do what you're trying to do.
I know that's something that came up with all three of you is really avoiding scope creep. So what advice do you have for scoping out an integration and setting expectations up front?
Talk to your people, you know, get a good grasp on what's going on. You know, just general project management, assessments, surveys, my personal technique is talk to everyone that you can talk to until you're done talking to people, because usually when I'll launch into a new project, it's an area that I'm a one-man show at my municipality, so I am the project team, the alpha and the omega. So for me, I'll talk to everybody, especially the end users, and I get a lot of excellent feedback from them. It's good to have a ground level perspective as well as the managerial upper level perspective, and try to make everybody happy.
Sure. I think it's important too to make sure that you get people to agree on what it is you're trying to accomplish. One of the things that we see a lot is we'll have a bunch of different users who are giving input, and you find out that they all kind of do things a little bit differently. And that results in inconsistencies in the data because they've got some tribal knowledge with regard to how a process works, but the systems that they're using don't institutionalize any of those kinds of rules. So making sure that you get everybody in agreement, and then, like you said, putting a plan together. It's really nice to have an agile development environment, but you got to make sure that there's a plan in place. And you can iterate within smaller deliverables, but eventually you have to be done with it and move on. It doesn't mean you can't come back and modify it later on, but you need to keep making progress.
And building on what both of these guys said, it's important to set realistic expectations as well, because if you don't, you can think of some of the ideas that these folks are going to come up with, and they're not always realistic.
Yeah.
So what resources do you frequently use for integration projects rather than, reinventing the wheel?
Answers. One word answer is answers. I usually will do a little research on there first to see what folks have done. As I'm going through the project, and there's a new piece that I'm going to have to learn about, I'll go there first. Lately, I've been going to answers first and then to my VAR secondarily.
That's good. Joe, did you have anything else?
Well, we're a little bit different because we're not implementing a system per se. What we're doing is we're kind of doing the things that there's really no documentation for. So a lot of times, we're presented with something that is not necessarily the first time that you're trying to do something, but it presents all kinds of different challenges, and it's not like the kind of thing you can go up onto experts.com or something like that and find somebody who's had experience in it, because by definition, it's a custom integration. So that's one of the reasons why we spend so much time with our product trying to figure out how to get into these applications, is because if we can't get in, then you don't need our product. So it's an all or nothing kind of thing. So a lot of times it's just a lot of research. We have really good partners. A lot of the Laserfiche partners of ours are really good about getting us access to systems that we would never be able to have access to, because a lot of times what we're putting in place is competing with something that some other vendor wants to sell. So if they can get us access to a system, we could actually do the primary research we need to do in order to figure out if something is doable or not doable. And we want to do that quickly.
Brad?
I kind of walk the same path as Chris. The whole Laserfiche Answers site has become a valuable resource for me, because I'm kind of a one-man shop, for lack of better terms, as well. So that'll be a lot of times my first stop, and then I work real close with some of the guys at OneSource, who's our VAR, and we work well together, and it's easy to call them up and say, hey, look over this for me, or what would you do, So Chris and I have kind of the same methodology in that approach.
Can I just add one
Yeah,
little
yeah.
thing here? And this would apply to the person who's building out the workflows that you're using, or the project manager, as something to consider too. If I've been working on a workflow for 2 or 3 days, I've kind of got these blinders on. So I will actually, make an appointment with, my VAR's workflow expert, and just have a second set of eyes go over the whole thing until they're seeing double too, but it really minimizes, I tell myself this, it minimizes, the risk of bugs occurring. It's the most I could do.
Wonderful. And to keep things interactive with you all today, we are going to do a poll. I'm going to quickly change screens here. I don't know how many of you have used something called Poll Everywhere before, but it's a cool online polling tool. Let me pull it up. So a question that we wanted to ask you all is, what application is highest priority for integrating with Laserfiche at this time? And you can submit your response either by going on your smartphone to pollev.com/Laserfiche, and there'll be a multiple choice option, or you can text Laserfiche to 22333 and then text your response A, B, C, or D. So I'll give you all a second to respond. We'll watch them come in. Should have got some Jeopardy hold music or something for this.
So you text Laserfiche to connect, and then you type your response.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, I'm slacking on
Anybody
my
wanna- you put-
music.
You want to put a little money on the wager? Put a little something? Whoa, this is cool.
We certainly have a leader.
Watch out now.
It's like a horse race.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bam.
retract that previous.
All right. I don't know. I still see some people messing with their phones. We're gonna do another one of these later.
Yeah, so don't get too comfortable.
Emails coming from behind.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it. You can still submit your response if you're still going, but let's go ahead and start with talking about ERP. Chris, I'm gonna let you take the lead on this. If you were to summarize quickly in a couple minutes, what's the biggest takeaway for somebody looking to integrate with an ERP system? What advice would you give?
All right, there's two-part response. One is beta test until you can't beta test, and then beta test some more. Just, to minimize, because, you don't know what you don't know. But then the caveat to that is my ERP system, as long as you have a certain field in the template of the Laserfiche document, you're always going to be able to find your document, no matter where it is or what happened to it. So that being said, the risk factor is kind of low. The last project I launched, it had a low risk factor, so I had really poor beta testing, but we launched it anyways because we knew we would never lose anything. The users were not going to see what was going on the back end. So I would say, so just to summarize all that, beta testing is key. If that's not an option, make sure you leverage your risks and see if you really need to push forward for more beta testing and demand it, or let it out of the gate, and be ready to be ready to do some quick repairs.
Joe or Brad?
Yeah, with ERP systems, they tend to be highly customizable. And again, my perspective is a little bit different than these two gentlemen, but a lot of our integrations are done through the user interface. So, and they tend to be, applications tend to be applications that are distributed very broadly. So you've got maybe different versions of Windows, different operating systems, different versions of browsers, people who are running applications in different screen resolutions. So you need to do lots of testing. You need to make sure that just because it works on the developer's machine doesn't mean it's going to work everywhere. And that's regardless of whether you're using our product or the new Laserfiche connector or any of the other ones that are out there. So that's an important point. I had another point. I'm trying to remember what that other point was with ERP. I'll have to come back to it. Why don't you go and I'll remember it.
So as far as case management goes, we're actually doing an integration now with our sheriff's department that I mentioned earlier. And I think the biggest thing that I've had to learn, and this is kind of similar to my previous response, is don't pigeonhole yourself into one piece of the technology. There's a lot of things that you can use, a lot of pieces of the suite that you can use to do different things similarly or totally differently or better or worse. So just don't put blinders on. Keep your vision full and look at all your options. Don't lock down on one specific piece.
I remembered.
Please.
It's data
Share.
replication. One of the things that we see all the time is that folks want to replicate data that is subject to change in multiple systems. So rather than just putting the metadata that you need to retrieve documents in Laserfiche, they might actually replicate data. And the problem you run into is that you've got your system of record, your ERP system, and it's got information. A simple example would be like a phone number. That's a number that's highly subject to change. That should not be a piece of data that's in your imaging system, because eventually somebody's going to look at one or the other system and they may be out of sync. So make sure that the data that lives in the ERP system or any other core system lives there and only there. And then you use some other tool that does a join for you so that you don't have to replicate this data. And even the best VARs, I've seen that, they say, for convenience sake for the users, we'll put the data in both places, but it's just really not a good idea.
Thank you all. Okay, so we'll move on to the next topic of conversation for the panel. I just want to take a couple minutes. I know that there are a lot of folks in the room looking to integrate with applications that you all have experience with. So would you take a bit of a deep dive into your favorite integration and tell us about the challenges that you faced during the project? Chris, we'll let you go first again.
Okay, picking on me.
Yeah. You're closest to me. It's your fault for sitting there.
That's the problem.
I'm going to have to go with my favorite one is the last big project I launched. It's with my purchasing department, and we use Tyler Eden. So I basically had to mirror all the data processing that Tyler does with workflow. When a requisition is no longer a requisition, now it's a PO. When the PO is open, now it's closed. Many queries, scheduled queries going, seeing what the status is of these documents. But that's kind of the geeky side of it. Functionally, all those documents within Laserfiche, when they meet a certain criteria, they may have been paid for with bond funds, tax exempt bond funds. So we're a municipality, we get these, multi-million-dollar bond funds to pay for new roadways, streetlights, you name it. We have to be able to retrieve all those documents. Anything that money touched, we have to be able to recall all those documents and provide them to IRS auditors if need be. So that was my project, and that's a far-reaching, multi-departmental thing. So behind the scenes, if somebody makes a requisition, it gets approved, behind the scenes, that attachment is actually gone down to an RME folder, and I've got some transparent records management up where everybody else sees it. So it had the most moving parts. It was definitely a challenge. If I were to do it again, I would compartmentalize my workflows a little bit more so I could use the same one in different places. I did that to a certain extent about halfway through it. But I don't know, that was my favorite one because it was the most challenging and multi-departmentally. It was just a big kind of Leviathan.
Joe, what about you?
Do you have the slide that I sent you?
I do, right there.
All right, we have props. This is actually a really good project. I think the use case will look familiar to you, and it's got both, great return on investment parts of the story and some not good project management parts, which I'll get into. This use case was for a mid-sized electronics retailer, and they have 3 people who spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes extra shifts as well, entering in 500 invoices a day that come in, both the invoices and the shipping data. So they would go and they would manually enter that information into their Epicor Profit 21 system. And it was a, really arduous task for people to do, highly subject to error because you're typing in codes and part numbers and, 4 decimal price values. It's just a mess. So they decided to kind of institutionalize this whole process, and they implemented Laserfiche, and what they did was the following. They decided to take the computer-generated documents that were invoices and shipping documents, run that through Laserfiche, do some kind of forms recognition process, and then create a set of XML files that had all the extracted data, put it in a queue, waiting for our software to pick it up. In addition to that, they took the handwritten documents. Believe it or not, vendors send handwritten invoices, handwritten shipping documents, and they would send them to a third party, a company called Cartrett. If you haven't heard of them, I recommend you take a look at them. Very interesting technology. But they take handwritten documents, and they have humans all over the world look at pieces of the document and index it for you. So even though it's handwritten information, it's almost 100% accurate, and they do it really fast and really cost effective. So they would do the same thing. They would do their extractions or their indexing, and they would drop both the data and the documents, the original scanned documents, in a queue. We would then wake up running on a VM and grab those XML files and do the following. We pair the shipping documents with the invoices so that we have all the documents that have been received. And then we do what the user would do. We open up Profit 21, we log in, we do a search on the PO. When we find it, we enter all the shipping and invoice data, and including all the line items. When we're done, we hit the save button, a voucher number is generated, we extract that, and then we write that voucher number over to Laserfiche as well. And any of the documents that were scanned in through Captricity that hadn't gotten into the repository yet. Then we close down, do the same thing. We'll do that 500-600 times a day. That process went from 3 people, 8 hours a day, to 90 minutes of computer processing a day, and about a half hour or 45 minutes of somebody handling the exceptions. So the return on investment is just tremendous. The downside of it was we hit on some of the project management issues that we talked about before. We had a really good power user who came in and knew the process. The problem was her process was a little bit different than the other 2 people who did it. So trying to get them to agree on what the process should be was a challenge. And then they would kind of disappear from time to time. So now you've got all the vendors trying to figure out, well, when we have a question, what do we do? Well, we can't wait a week to get an answer, so we're just going to do something. And then we started iterating through version after version after version. So a project that should have taken about 6 weeks took about 4 months. And the customer didn't care that much because none of the vendors really had the guts to say, hey, we're going to charge you more for this because it took longer. But they also lost out on that productivity for all that time. So it's a good example from the standpoint of the results, but the process could have been a lot better based on the kind of things we've talked about.
Brad, what about your example?
I almost broke a sweat with that one.
You get cool factor points for having the
You
transcription.
should have gone last. So, one of my biggest, or one of the first integrations I did was with our sheriff's department, and they wanted to take the process of patrons going online to do to do purchase permits for handguns. The process as it began was someone would go to the sheriff's department, they'd stand in line, they'd fill out a form, and then they would come back whenever their permits were ready, and then they'd pay $5 and drive on. So it was a very intensive job for the records folks at the sheriff's department. So they reached out to a company that offered a solution to them to put this form online, and then the patrons would go and pay for it online, and then they would send them a file, and they send the sheriff's department a file, and they could do what they wanted to with it. And I think this was like $4 for every application that was done. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. We'll just integrate this with Laserfiche, and we'll do it all and have it in-house, and everything's right here. You don't have to worry about a file coming to you. You don't have to upload it. It's going to do it on the back end for you. So once we finally kind of hemmed and hawed with them a little bit, we came up with a solution we integrated we used the SDK to integrate Laserfiche with SharePoint, and the patrons now go to our public website, they create an account, they log in, they fill out their application, which has some business rules built into it, and then after they pay, it sends that directly to Laserfiche on the back end, and then it notifies the sheriff's department, hey, you have a new permit, and they expect this person to come in when they call them, or they'll say, let me change that. We actually built an interface on the back end that they would go in, click a button, and it would bring up their application, and then they could change the status, hey, it's ready to pick up, or whatnot, and it would automatically notify the user, hey, Brad, your permit's ready, come and pick it up, and they would show up, and then we'd be done. And we estimated about a 60 to 70% time savings just for the sheriff's records employees to do more important things. Mm-hmm. So I think the big one with that is helping the records department or the sheriff records department realize there's a better vision than just picking up something off the street from a vendor in a lot of cases. No offense, Joe. But there's always my whole vision again has been to make sure you look at all the tools you have with what you have in house, and when we kind of showed them that vision, it saved a lot of money and a lot of time.
Thank you. And so with that, we're on to our next poll. Let me switch the screen here for you all. All right, so our next question, whoops, stop. The next question is, what do you find most challenging about integration projects? And the possible responses are scope creep, stakeholder buy-in, user adoption, or measuring the true cost and ROI.
Yeah, right? That's what I would have thought.
Well, we kind of covered it a little bit
Yeah.
already.
It's true. Chris, you're a musician.
Yeah.
Hold music,
You want a
please.
drum beat? He's a drummer. You do a drum beat. Need some hummed elevator music.
Yes.
Like the girl from Iwo Jima.
I guess anybody cares about getting their money back.
Yeah, right.
This is it. This is it. Yeah, could have given you some time to prepare. Okay, here we go.
Oh,
Somebody
ROI is
wants to know about ROI.
It's on the field.
Okay, I'm gonna call it. Oh, it's close. Let's start with talking about user adoption. Chris?
User adoption. I've got an interesting perspective on this because I have no clout at my, I have no authority. I am a user myself. So I have to come up with methods for buy-in. with that being said, you know, I've done it. I've gone both ways. Like if there's if I've got a roadblock or I'm not getting any cooperation, et cetera, then I can escalate it. But I prefer to start with my users and get their buy-in. I'll admit it, I have resorted to French pastries being delivered every time I show up. You know, little stuff like that goes a long way. There was one implementation that I just recently did where the last time that supervisor had to learn a new software, she had a medical emergency in the training session because she freaked out. She like had a panic attack, anxiety. It was the end of the fiscal year, and her workload just quadrupled because she had this new software. Long story short, I had to deal with her, and I had to walk through her fears, and like implement a new piece of software, Laserfiche, an integration with Laserfiche, and so what did I have to do? I had to play my A game. I had to know what I was talking about. I had to know the limitations of the software. What is possible, what is not possible. When have you asked for too much from me? Well, I let the software dictate that. What is possible and what is not possible is the ceiling is set by the software you have. And if you're willing to do a little extra work, which I had to do again and again and again, like they were just happy. And then at the end of the project, it was, if I could turn that project into a trophy, I would have put it on my desk because this was, the lady who had a medical emergency at a training session, and I successfully implemented, a new software project with her. So, working the ground up, but also, just realizing the limitations of your software, what's possible, and playing your A game.
That's good advice. Joe?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about working from the ground up, because when you get the cloud, and I'll help you get the cloud really doesn't help much, because all that does is kind of send people underground and have them start to subvert what you're doing, becoming more passive aggressive. There is no doubt there is security in comfort, and knowledge is power. So if I know how a process works, and nobody else knows how it works, or they don't really know how it works, well, then that gives me a certain level of control. And if I'm now going to have a system automated that's going to remove that from me, well, I'm going to be resistant to it. So I think what you need to do is you need to clearly articulate, here's what we're going to do, here's what the benefit's going to be for you, or here's where you're going to go after this is implemented. You're going to move on to bigger and better things. So don't be afraid of it. Contribute to the process, especially if you're going to continue to be around to use it. Make it as good as it possibly can be. And this, you guys have probably experienced this, don't let the vendors overpromise. This is something that I see all the time. We even had a little bit of it on that project before, where a vendor would come in and, the sales guys, everything is just sunshine. So they go in and they sell this is going to be the greatest thing. And all of a sudden, user expectations are way up here. And then the poor ProServe people come in, they have to actually make it work, and they start to pare things back. And immediately the users start to get buyer's remorse. Well, this isn't what I was told we were going to get. Oh, this isn't going to really help that much. So making sure you've got clear and realistic expectations going in, I think, helps a lot as well.
Brad?
I think Joe is on something there. I think it's important for you to kind of think small, and then make sure that user base knows that you're there to make their life a little easier. At least you're hoping you're doing that. And I think through that, I've been fairly fortunate that, a lot of times I'm given a project to do, and I don't have to worry about the user adoption piece, because I do my piece, and, my bosses and their bosses, they say where they're going to use this. So I do what they say. But I think it's important to think small and show them that you're there to make their life easier, because isn't that what it's all about? I mean, that's why we do these things, to make processes and applications or, anything easier. So.
Right, absolutely. Okay. So for the last chunk of questions, I wanted to focus on results, because I know that Integrations can be built and they can be wonderful, but they don't have very much meaning unless people know about them and they're delivering something valuable to your organization, right? So the first question that I wanted to ask was, how do you market the integrations internally among your team after they're completed? Do you just want to keep going, Chris? Go straight to you again?
You said that.
I was, one great thing I was doing was a lunch and learn kind of thing where, I'd invite everyone and have an area of, a subject matter that I would share about and get people talking about it, show them what Laserfiche can do, and just have have a starting point, but then let the conversation go wherever it was going to go, and be ready to show them quick fields, show them where, do you know that you can automate that? You don't have to actually do that, and it's, I don't know. I come from it from a perspective of just, I want to blow people's minds. Laserfiche is awesome. It's a powerful tool, and you can really blow people's minds and make their lives much easier and better and more efficient and more accurate. So I just make myself available. And I was doing a series of like these little lunch seminars, and basically I was just showing off what Laserfiche could do. And we would do silly things like, I wonder if the word rhinoceros exists in our resolutions from 1911. And we would do stuff like that, like have it really quirky and dorky and, more fun, the better. But we would do interesting word searches to show them what a text search is, because you're going to have a spectrum of users, and 9 times out of 10, there's always somebody that would say, oh my gosh, and focus in on that person,
And the French pastries are delivered at that time as well.
Having snacks is good. Better the snacks.
Joe?
I can imagine what people try to type into that search engine, especially come Friday afternoon. I think there are 3 things. First, having tangible results so that everybody knows what the target is, and then delivering those. And if you can't deliver those for some reason, be clear as to why that couldn't be done now, assuming it can be done later, or why it can't be done, and then trade off and do something else. In terms of selling it, one thing that I saw a customer do that they do frequently, which I didn't understand at first, but it kind of made sense after I saw the process. When they had a success, they would create a case study for internal distribution. Mm-hmm. And so what would happen is you got the people who were involved in devising whatever the integration was. They would then make sure that it was successful because they were going to benefit from it, but they were also going to have an opportunity to tell that story somewhere down the line. And that process of getting these people involved and crafting the language and then eventually presenting it either at a lunch and learn or something like that was really, it was an interesting way to get people to not only know about it, but buy into it. And at first they said, this is kind of hokey. Who's going to do this? But they do it frequently, they do it religiously, and it worked out very nicely.
That's an interesting take. Brad? I
mean, really, Laserfiche makes my job easier because when, our tax department or our finance department comes and says, I need to make this easier. I need to make this work more smoothly. I don't necessarily have to do an integration per se to say, maybe you should use quick fields to do this and just show them, and that's all the marketing I need. They see how much easier it is. They see how much quicker it is. They see that this can save me 2 hours during my day, and it just kind of does the rest itself.
Yeah, show and tell is not just a tool for kindergarten,
There
right?
you go.
Right. Well, I know that we weren't so interested in ROI, but I am going to ask the question, how do you measure the success of an integration?
I don't know. I'm going to pass.
Phone a friend.
I want to go last.
Okay.
Who wants to go last?
For us, it's easy. It's very easy. We go into a project, and quite often our automations are all about reducing clicks, reducing typing, reducing errors. These are very easy to measure metrics. So when we're done, the process better be faster, it better be more accurate, and then we kind of let the bean counters handle what does that translate into, because that's where the math starts to get a little fuzzy, because I'm still paying the people who are out there, but hopefully we've moved them on to higher order functions, delivering more value to the organization. But it's kind of easy for us because the metrics are easy to measure.
Brad, you ready for it?
I guess. I don't know if Chris wanted to go again.
I'll go after you.
This one, I wrote down time saved. for the sheriff's department, I mean, if you can take half of your day away from meeting with customers at the window to give them a permit and sign it, that's a big deal. I mean, I can spend 4 hours of my day doing something more important, chasing perps or,
Right.
whatever. But that's the big one for us. How much time can we save? Because we all know 8 hours isn't always enough. So if I can save half of that, or even a third of that,
Yeah, that's huge.
yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Just to echo what everybody said already, reduction of public records requests, less people coming to the town hall or city hall, more people going to our website, it's increased efficiency of staff, I don't know how it is in your municipalities, but in our municipality, if you have a municipality, in my municipality, everybody is, treading water constantly, so to tread less water.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, we did want to leave plenty of time for questions. We have experts up here that would love to hear from you here about the projects that you're looking to do and answer your questions. So, any questions?
To the left, to the left.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Oh, just kidding. We'll start on the left then. I can't see around this.
Your other left.
So my question is for the two gentlemen on the ends. You both sound like you, one, work in government sector, two, are kind of a one-man show, and three, very willing to bend for your customers. So my question to you is, how do you do the dog and pony show and not get trapped in the ever-looming cycle that is, ooh, me too, do it now?
I don't know if you ever don't get trapped in that. Everybody knows when the customer comes to you, they want it and they want it now. But it goes back to setting those realistic expectations. I've been pretty fortunate to have a good project manager who'll stand up and say, look, we have an integration we're doing for the next 3 weeks, nothing until after that, even if we're doing the same thing for another department. So you just got to be upfront and you want to do these things for your customers, but you've got to be realistic.
I'm in the middle of that right now, and so basically my rule of thumb is, put out fires and emergencies first. If you got bugs in your software, address them immediately. That comes first for me. Anything retroactively that needs to be fixed, and then two answers. One is in the order that they're received, which is my general MO. But if I have an agenda, like if I can go and assimilate an area of the finance department, maybe I'll bump that up because that's going to further the integration of Laserfiche in my organization. So I'd have to, generally I'll go in the order received, but if I'm going to benefit a little bit more from the global achievement of the organization, maybe I'll bump something up every now and then at my discretion.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, we're looking at integrating Laserfiche with other applications and other applications with each other. And sometimes we'll do them in-house and sometimes we'll outsource that or collaborate with a vendor to complete those. Do you have a strategy for managing your integrations? Do you document them, maintain?
Good question.
Planning for those things?
Yeah, to repeat the question for the viewers at home, the question was about how do you maintain your integrations, and a piece in there also about outsourcing versus doing in-house. How do you document? How do you maintain that knowledge? Chris,
Good
you were
question. Yeah.
hemming and
I would
hawing.
say ideally you'd want to use some kind of project management. Well, I take that back. Project management software like Microsoft Project isn't going to achieve what you're looking for. That's going to, get you from start to finish with a project. But as far as documenting it, quick and easy response, I do this with some of mine, is I make a video to myself about what I did. With just like a screen capturing software, with a microphone, right? So, just explaining to myself what I did, especially with these workflows, because to troubleshoot a workflow, depending on how many invoked workflows are within it, you kind of have to queue up the whole thing into your mind to be able to troubleshoot, you know, which part is, at least that's how I have to do it. I have to queue the whole thing up in my mind, and getting there sometimes can take hours, you know, to just kind of assimilate. So I try to expedite that process. I was typing notes to myself, taking screenshots. I felt like there could be a faster way. I was making videos to myself, but this sounds silly, but after I would make a video to myself, from myself, it just stuck in my brain better that way. I don't know, the memory of making the video was more permanent than the actual information itself. You know, I don't know, a different part of the brain was processing at that time, so it made it more permanent. So I guess taking video snapshots, explaining what's going on, I say would be the fastest and easiest way to do it from the person that created, like, you know, showing highlights and, you know, points to really you know, to, what's the word I'm looking for? To focus in on.
We do videos as well in terms of end product. Now, as a vendor, we have a vested interest in that because we also use it as a marketing tool, assuming we have permission to do that. But we're pretty simple. Every time we do a project, we take all the learning from that project and it goes into a wiki that all of our developers and our ProServe people have access to. So they can go in and they can kind of see what was figured out. What application have we now hit on for the first time? What were the challenges associated with it? One thing that I find is critically important, that is just something that people don't do because it's really annoying, but it is critically important, and that is if you start with the specification document, when you have the eureka moments, make sure you go back and update the documentation. Because when the system's done, someone's going to look at that specification, they're going to look at the result, and they're going to say, well, how come they're different? What happened along the way? And you really don't want to lose that, that piece of the puzzle. Because quite often those decisions were important decisions. Somebody important had to make them. They were made for very good reasons, and you want to make sure they're documented. So we always make sure, our ProServe people make sure they always update the specifications. They're versioned, obviously, so that the system that the customer has matches the paper trail that created it.
And with us, we haven't done a great job of the documentation piece, and that's probably more my fault than anything because I remember some of this stuff, but no one else can read my mind. So, but
Or you could get hit by a bus.
yeah,
Right, there is
thanks.
that.
Heaven forbid.
Put that on me. But anyways, so a lot of the integrations we've done, we have written web services and different snippets of code and such. So we try to write those web services, for example, broad enough to solve the solution of this application, but also broad enough to possibly solve another application that may come down the road. So we're not reinventing the wheel each time. We can readily provide something that's consumable by multiple applications. So it's less time that we have to sit there and say, okay, now I've got to integrate with Joe Smith's pool hall, I don't know, and we have to give something for them to consume. So it's about being broad but precise enough to serve the needs of multiple integrations.
Yeah.
So you're both from government, I'm from government. My department, I'm the town clerk for a very large town. We own, you know, we bought Laserfiche. And we use it along with an archive back scanning project. So it is operating in a few other departments and ready for document retrieval. Have you, since you're with government, figured out a way, like different ways to integrate it in other departments? Like you're talking about your finance department. The only thing I'm doing for finance is scanning their vouchers so they can retrieve them for the auditors.
How about invoices? So her question is, you know, do you have any recommendations of how to integrate with other departments?
They didn't ask us to do the invoices, because of FOIL requests.
Well, here's where I'm going with that, is if you can find a type of document that is gonna touch all the other departments, such as invoices. Everybody has to approve invoices. Everybody has to make requisitions. If you can focus on one implementation that everybody's gonna have to use a little bit, it'll get it out there.
But that's what we've done now with them getting vouchers. They've let me scan the last 3 years, and they're using them that way. But the indexing, so now what we're using quick fields. We've created a new form so that we can at least populate the date. That's like, it's really a simple project. It wasn't that difficult.
our IT department is totally, you know, too little people, too much work.
Overworked,
you know,
underpaid.
It's, you know, so maybe not as interested in finding little projects like that they can do where, because then you get buy-in. Every department that has a little, that touches it, loves it,
Mhm.
and you can just grow from there.
That's another way that I've been successful is just putting on like Laserfiche, you know, informational things, and then whoever was interested, go with them. I call that the surround and conquer technique.
So I'm just wondering if you've like somehow documented situations where you've implemented.
Check out the
Laserfiche.
Solutions Exchange.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think there's somebody sitting over there that would love to talk to you about it too, Joanna,
Yeah.
the author of the Solution Exchange.
Hi.
So, if you don't know what the Solutions Exchange is, it's a website where lots of different customers and other members of the Laserfiche community basically share examples of how they've done something with Laserfiche. So, for example, both Chris and Brad solutions that they described, the Tyler Mina's integration and the shotgun permits.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Shotgun, handgun, minigun, whatever.
Those examples are on the Solution Exchange, as well as multiple other ones where you can just look at there and see how other people have done things to get ideas for your own implementations.
Okay,
So
I haven't looked at that before.
it's laserfiche.com/solution exchange. Feel free to talk to me after. I'll be in the info center too.
And
I think one of the other things to keep in mind as well that might help with that, and this just isn't a shameless plug for our product, but try not to make the document management system look like its own silo, where all the documents kind of go to die. What you really need to do is you need to show how document management supplements every process that people are doing, and of course, workflows and all that. But try to make it as relevant as possible for people. So for example, when we try to sell a solution, we don't really talk much about the documents. We talk about the process that would be enabled by being able to integrate data between the systems. And that's when people kind of get the aha moment where they say, that's something I could use. And they don't even realize the pieces that would make up that solution. Or they didn't know that a document management system could provide some of that functionality for them. So relevancy is critically important.
Yeah, and if we had someone within our organization
Mhm.
from IT that could do that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm the town clerk, that really isn't something I should be doing.
Sure.
But you already said it. If that position goes to IT, do you think it would be at the top of the priority list?
no.
Or
No,
so
absolutely
you
not.
probably have a benefit of keeping it within your department.
yes.
I was wondering if any of you have had experience with integrations with email, particularly Google Mail. I know Outlook is integrated, but we don't have Outlook. We have Gmail.
Yeah, to repeat the question, it was about an integration with email systems, specifically Gmail, Google email.
I have none, but didn't I hear them mention that at the keynote about integrating the iCal? Or maybe that was one of the classes that iCal can integrate with Google Mail.
So it was shown briefly in the keynote using Laserfiche connector, but I
That
don't
was
know.
an Outlook, right?
And they mentioned just briefly at the end of the connector portion,
Right,
Gmail
gotcha.
as well. But
Gotcha.
Joe, do you have any experience?
Yeah, the experience that we've had with email, and we got to be careful because there's some crossover between what we do and what forms processing engines do. But the kinds of projects we've done are things where there'll be a folder set up where people will send emails to with an attached document. And what we'll do is we'll tear through the email looking for the metadata, if you will, based on patterns or things like that, and then extract the attachment out of the email and forward it to the back-end system. Is that something that Laserfiche can do? It can, but for some reason, they don't make that connection that you can use various pieces to do that kind of thing. So, or one thing that we do often is that people will receive forms in an email, and they'll want us to extract the data out of that form, usually a PDF, and it's a well-known document like a claim notice for insurance. Grab all that data out and then go and automatically type it into some system of record. So that's kind of the extent of what we've done with email, grabbing information out of the text of the email, using that as metadata, or taking the attachment, data contained within, and entering that in some system, some core system.
And without knowing specifically what you're wanting to do, if it's just that you want to get the email into Laserfiche, I mean, okay, and your attachment stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
a very simplistic approach, you could use Snapshot to print the stuff in there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a Joe solution, but that's a Brad
We
solution.
work with snapshots as well, though.
There is a session which is at 4:30, MP 109, that is for the email integration, exchange engine. Today at 4:30.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Anybody missing on this side?
Brad, can you briefly explain how you're integrating Laserfiche with Munis, what you're using it for?
Yeah, it's the main way we use it. It's not. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it. We have a clerk in our finance department. They scan in batches of checks. We use quick fills to process those checks and put those checks into Laserfiche. Well, we want to make sure that there's a match for Munis. So we just have a small integration that is integrated. It's in SharePoint, but it's a basic query that goes in and compares the checks from Laserfiche to the checks in Munis and says, hey, these aren't in there. And then she knows what she needs to do.
I'm
It's
just
pretty
wondering why you
simple.
need them in two places.
That's a very good question. We'll take that one offline.
The answer is
Yeah,
yes.
we've been fighting that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, we'll go ahead and wrap things up. As Joanna mentioned, both of the Solution Exchange articles that Chris and Brad have submitted can be found on the Laserfiche website. I'm happy to send along the direct link if any of you are having troubles finding it. Please engage with everybody on answers. Our panelists are active on Laserfiche Answers, asking questions and sharing best practices. So I'd really encourage you to join those industry groups and the general answers groups to ask those questions. And of course, there's a class tomorrow at 8 a.m. in Grand JK that is also about effective integration strategies. So that'll be a good one for you as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. Feel free to stick around and ask our panelists some one-on-one questions if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Thank you.